Yes. Sennheiser. Wait, what are these? HD660S. That's right. Can't see. Stereo azimuth here. And I have a pair of I was going to say DT, not dynamic, biodynamic. These are HD660Ss. I have, I did my whole Sennheiser video. Like I love Sennheiser's video, and I'll post it here. And I didn't have a pair of HD660Ss at the time. Somebody sent me a pair, and somebody also sent me a pair of modified ones. The Jupiter Audio Research HD660s, which are modified, which we'll get to in a minute. But I wanted to talk about first the HD660Ss. Now, when let's just talk about the design and stuff like that first, as we always do. The headband and everything is just like a 650s. I mean, these were kind of designed in that respect, and you can kind of tell. The only thing that really changed, they got this weird kind of like Sennheiser, and it's kind of embossed. It looks really cool, I ain't gonna lie. But they are just kind of like flat black, but they have the same exact pads. They have the same exact foam on the inside. The outside does look a little different. Here is a HD650, just to compare. So they do where the driver is does look a little bit different from the outside. No longer see the foam and all of that. So, but they sound really good. We'll get to that in a second. But the cable that you get with it comes just like the weird box, like the foam box that you see that I don't know, like opens up and the foam and everything. I don't know. But you also get these two cables, like 1/4 inch, looks like gold plated, and you also get this balanced Pentacon cable, and it's got like the 650 things on it. I didn't really use these. I have my own like balance cable that I use for testing, but these are cool to like kind of have around. When I first listened to these, as far as like the sound, when I first listened to them, I was like really sort of like almost disappointed. I was like, where's all the sound? It sounded flat, sounded almost mid-centric, it sounded very low mid-driven, not a lot of air. And then I started looking, and I'm like, these pads are very, very worn. Like, look at these. Like, these are flat. Just to give you a difference, here's my 650 pads. Like, look at that. These are brand new pads. These are probably like maybe 6 months old. Like, look at those. Flat, almost flat as a pancake. And you could tell, too, because my ears were, like, hitting the foam on the inside. So I was like, okay, wait. Let me take off these pads. Let me take off my new pads, the ones that are fairly new, put them on here to really evaluate them. And that's when things started to change. And that's when I noticed that 660, it got a little bit more air up top, and then comparatively to the 650. And here's where the differences, like, kind of lie, is that the 660 had a little bit more sort of like the bass was not as defined. It was a little bit more kind of bass, but it was very sort of loose. The mids sounded okay, not as like silky as the 650s. I could tell they were, especially in the upper mids, they were a little bit brighter, a little bit more clarity up in the upper mids. And then the highs, they didn't really get as pinpointy. They were there, but they weren't as really, like I felt, as like sort of accurate, I guess you would say. They were a little kind of smearing that way. And the soundstage was also very different. I felt like the 660s were more like if the 600s are like right against your head, and like the 650s are more enveloping, these were almost a mixture of the two, but it still felt a little more closed in. It didn't really feel quite as open, I guess that you would say. And and looking at it and then going from the different systems, the Sennheiser HD660S are rated at 150 ohms. It's a little bit easier to drive. So as I went from equipment to equipment, I noticed that, and this is where there's kind of like, I don't know, some good things and some bad things. So yes, there is an improvement on the sound quality because there is a little bit more upper mids. There's a little bit more bass. It's a little bit more like comforting. But then also, here's sort of almost like the good and the bad, right? Is that when I went up to upper equipment, it got better, but it didn't get substantially better. The 650s and the 600s are kind of touted as these, scalability, right? Like where your equipment gets better and you can hear the difference in the headphones, even though that they're not like really expensive headphones. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, $300, $400 is still pretty expensive. I mean, when most people who look at headphones and they go and look at headphones at the, big box stores, they're looking at $100, $150 maybe. I mean, max for like, and then, you're telling your friends like, yeah, I spent like $300 on these headphones or $400 or $500. I think they're like, I saw the 660s at $499, but they can get them for like $399 or $329 and if they run sales or whatever. So, and that's pretty expensive. So, in comparison to like in the hi-fi world where you're talking about like, everything from, Hi-Fi-Man and Odyssey and ZMF and, all these exotics, like, yeah, I mean, some of those headphones are $2,000 and $3,000. I mean, so yeah, when you're talking about that, it's like they almost look at these, like the hi-fi world almost looks these as like mid-fi or even mid-lo-fi, which I don't really quite agree with. But the point that I'm trying to make is with these, all I really needed for them to sound good was my regular mid-fi equipment with my Pidi amp or with a Valley amp or with some. It sounded fine. It sounded great. When I went over to my big amp, my like Black Widow amp and my Quicksilver amp, things got a little bit more improved, but it wasn't so much where I felt like I needed that equipment to really enjoy this headphone. And really, if you look at the marketing of this headphone, that's really what they were trying to do. They were trying to make an enjoyable headphone that had all of these aspects, but where you didn't need like this warm glow of tubes to sit next to really enjoy it. So I could probably take these and plug them into like my interface. Like if I was doing mixing or if I was doing like editing or if I was like just wanted to sit down and work and listen to these. I mean, I can plug them into just about anything and they would probably sound, fairly decent. With 150 ohms, if I plug them in my phone, they're not going to get very loud, but you don't want these headphones to sound really loud and aggressive. That's not what they're all about. They did sound kind of natural, and like I said, the only like sort of unnatural part was some of the top end sort of glariness, but after I only really got after a really, really long, like listening to them all day, like type listening situation. So going from that to the Jupiter Audio Research. So let me talk about these for a second. I mentioned the Jupiter Audio Research headphones on my Sennheiser video again. And I mentioned the 650s. And he does headphones or headphone modifications where you take your headphones, you send them to him, he does the mod, sends them back to you modded, okay? Kind of like Mod House did for the T50s and stuff like that, or T60s. Same sort of concept, but with Sennheisers. And he does like Sennheiser 580, 600, 650. He's even got a version 2 of the 650 and the 600. And I think he's working on an HD800. You can go to JupiterAudioResearch.com. I'll provide a link in the description. And, I think these right now will probably set you back about $350. Now, this is in addition to the cost of a pair of headphones, plus like shipping to them. But I'm going to tell you, all the modifications that he does on all the headphones that he does, not one of them make a big improvement over the stock headphones as with this mod. Meaning, I can have the 650s and then like have the Jar 650, and there's a difference. And I like the Jupiter Audio Research modded ones a little bit better. But when I compare them and say, okay, how different are they? There's, kind of a gap right there, right? Well, this is it's a much huger gap. It's a bigger gap than, like I said, any of the headphones that any of the mods that he's done to any of the headphones, which leads me to believe that like maybe Sennheiser, left a lot on the table for, what these things can really do. So let's just take a look at it real quick. So here's what they look like. I'm sorry for that. I should have turned off my auto stuff, but the outer cup is gone, and you have this, and you may not be able to see it because of the shadow, but it does say like Jupiter Audio Research right there, kind of stamped. And then there's another stamp down here, like Jar, for the Jupiter Audio Research. So if you hear me say Jar, that's what I mean, like Jar, like Jupiter Audio Research. And when I put these on, immediately I knew that there was a difference. And and otherwise they're exactly the same, the cups, everything else. But the difference in sound quality is that there was more clarity in the highs. So that kind of like what I was talking about before, where it was kind of like the smeariness, like really cleared up and got a lot more focused in the high end. Better instrument separation also because of that reason, because there was like more like sort of pinpoint precision. And then the lows didn't really seem quite as like loose and quite as like kind of big. And the low end got really tight and really controlled and a lot more defined. So, and it has really decent layering. And then even when I went up from my lower equipment to my higher equipment, like I was like, okay, now I can tell kind of the difference, like a lot more between something lower and something higher. But because they're still 150 ohm drivers and they're much easier to drive, I still could get a lot of enjoyment out of my, out of my Piety amp or out of my Valley amp. It still sounded great. I still didn't feel like I needed all the rest of this stuff. Now, when I went up to my 650s on all the rest of my high-end gear, I was like, yeah, maybe 650s, but, just because it has that big soundstage. But also, I got all the regular same stuff out of the 650s, which means that male vocals sound a little more syrupy, they sound a little more veiled, etc., etc. And if I was Sennheiser and I'm trying to make a headphone that sounded, less veiled than the 650 and works on a lot more pieces of equipment than really high-end amplifiers, then the 660S is what you got. And then with this even, I think even goes even one step further than that and makes it even sound even better. So consider that. The soundstage did open up a little bit, but not quite as much as like 650s would. So yeah, there's some good things about it. And there's some other things to consider with them. They are a little bit heavier because they have these things are not very, this is like a kind of plasticky feeling. They're not very, they have a little weight to them. And I know it's like adding damping and adding like the weight behind it and adding more mass basically. And I don't know what other mods that he's doing, but whatever, it sounds more focused. It sounds more like like more of a precision headphone. And I would much rather have this if I was sitting and editing and, dissecting stuff and wanting to hear like more details and stuff like that in my music. So I know I'm about 15 minutes into this video, and I just want to give a shout out. I mean, both headphones are really good. I just want you to know what you're getting, like with both headphones, and what you're getting with the upgrade on the Jupiter Audio Research. So if you have any questions or anything else that you would like to, shout at me if you've got a pair of these, or want to ask questions about it, about any other gear, that goes along with it, because synergy is very important. So, but hit me up in the comments, or, you can always email me as well. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you later. I'm Stereo Asmuth. We'll talk to you guys later.